American Top 40.
We're hearing the biggest hits in the USA by some of the biggest pop stars in the world. I'm Casey Kasem on AT40, and now we're up to an extra by the biggest selling American group of all time. They're a family group who got started on their career singing Christmas carols in the backseat of their old Rambler station wagon. They're the five-man band, three brothers, a cousin, and a friend, whose fabulous success story began in the 50s in Hawthorne, California. While they were in junior high school, all five boys developed a strong interest in music. The oldest brother, Brian, along with his cousin, Mike, convinced the other three to join them for some casual sing-alongs after school. And they began by practicing some familiar Christmas carols. Well, they quickly discovered that they had a terrific natural five-part harmony. And that inspired them to practice even more often. When their parents complained about the noise they were making, the boys just went outside, climbed in the back seat of Brian's old Rambler station wagon, and continued their harmonizing. For the holiday season, the group went public, singing Christmas carols up and down the streets of their neighborhood. Well, that distinctive five-part harmony that was born in the back of Brian Wilson's old Rambler went on to produce some of the best-known hit songs of the rock era. Enough to make the Beach Boys the biggest-selling American group of all time. As an AT40 extra, here are the Beach Boys with a holiday smash from their 1963 Christmas album, Little Saint Nick. The Beach Boys and an American Top 40 extra, Little Saint Nick. And the countdown continues.
The hits from coast to coast.
I'm Casey Kasem. Now we're up to the biggest selling American group in history. A group who got their start singing Christmas carols in the back of a car. Their story begins in the 1950s in a suburb of Los Angeles called Hawthorne, California. That's where the five original band members grew up. Three brothers plus their cousin and a friend. And it was during junior high school that their interest in music began bubbling up, especially for the oldest brother Brian and his cousin Mike. And the five teenage boys expressed that interest by getting together at Christmas time to sing carols. They'd practice their five-part harmony in Brian's bedroom, unless their parents objected to the noise, in which case they'd go out and sit in the back of Brian's old Rambler station wagon and do their singing there. When they finally felt they were good enough, the group went public, Christmas caroling up and down the streets of their neighborhood during the holidays. Well, those Christmas caroling sessions eventually turned into jam sessions as rock and roll took over. And by the early 1960s, these boys from Hawthorne, three Wilson brothers named Brian, Carl, and Dennis, their cousin Mike Love, and friend Al Jardine had become the Beach Boys. And they were turning out one hit after another. They became the biggest selling American group of all time, selling more than 90 million singles and albums. This week, they're in our countdown with their 32nd Top 40 hit. At number 28, the Beach Boys with Get You Back. The Beach Boys on American Top 40 at number 28, moving up 4 notches in our survey with Get You Back.
American Top 40.
Billboard ranks them, American Top 40 counts them down. Now we're up to the latest hit by one of the great supergroups of the rock and roll era. The group who hold the all-time record for hitting the top 40 with the most lead singers. They're an all-American institution who've been hitting the charts since way back in 1962. Their album sales have been stupendous, and they've racked up a total of 33 top 40 singles, most of them about surfing and cruising, and fun in the sun with plenty of girls. And that spells out the Beach Boys. In the 23 years since the Beach Boys began charting, each of the 5 original members has been featured as lead singer on at least one Beach Boys Top 40 hit. One group, 5 lead singers. And that's an all-time record. The Beatles, of course, did it with all 4 of their members. And Chicago's had 5 members on lead vocals, but not solo vocals. Only the Beach Boys have had solo lead vocals by 5 members. The 5 original members, Mike Love, Al Jardine, and the 3 Wilson brothers, Brian, Carl, and the late Dennis Wilson. This week, the Sultans of Sand and Surf are in our countdown with their 33rd Top 40 hit. The lead singer on this one, by the way, is Mike Love, with Brian Wilson humming the chorus. The Beach Boys on American Top 40, written by Mike Love and Terry Melcher, produced by Steve Levine. That's Get You Back from the album The Beach Boys. At number 26, it moves up 2 notches this week.
American Top 40.
The song at number 27 is the latest hit by the Beach Boys, the band that most critics credit with having done more to popularize the style of life in Southern California than any other act. But Carl Wilson of the Beach Boys recently told Musician Magazine that the image of Southern California painted by the Beach Boys wasn't really based in reality. He said, quote, Brian created this whole world at home at his piano, and people were mad to get to California. There was an awe connected to California and the beach and the way we lived, but it wasn't the real California so much as the California Brian Wilson made up in his songs. End of quote. After 2 weeks at number 26, Get You Back falls to number 27. The Beach Boys on American Top 40.
American Top 40.
I'm Shadoe Stevens. It's American Top 40. Okay, so now we're up to one of the biggest groups in the rock era. A group who formed when they spent their food money on musical instruments. It happened back in 1961 in Hawthorne, California. One sunny weekend, 2 parents, Murray and Audrey Wilson, decided to go away, take a little trip, and leave their 3 teenage sons, Brian, Carl, and Dennis, alone at home. Now, the boys were basically surfer kids who really loved music. The Wilson parents packed up to go away this one weekend. Their sons walked them to the door, said goodbye, and Mom and Dad gave them some money for food. Brian held the money, waving to his parents as they drove away. And as soon as they were out of sight, the 3 boys looked at the money and said, well, what should we do? Without too much argument, they hopped into Brian's car and headed down to the local music store. With all the money their parents gave them for food, they bought old, used musical instruments, a beat-up old organ, a guitar, a drum, and some drumsticks. They called up their cousin Mike Love and a neighborhood friend Al Jardine, and over the weekend the boys jammed together on their broken-down instruments. And Sunday night, Mom and Pop came back and found 5 hungry boys, but also a song they'd written called Surfin. A few months later, in 1962, Surfin became the first chart hit for the Beach Boys. And now, 26 years later, the Beach Boys have their 34th Top 40 hit. At number 16, the Beach Boys with Kokomo. The Beach Boys walking barefoot down the beach, waves washing over their ankles, singing Kokomo. It takes a 9-notch leap up the chart to number 16 this week. You can find American Top 40 every week on great radio stations in the 50 states and around the world, like Southwest North Dakota's favorite music station, KDIX, Dickinson, North Dakota. Now the story of the band whose first hit record got an F in a music class. It all began years ago, back in 1961 at Hawthorne High School in Southern California. There was this student named Brian. He was your typical teenager. He played in the football team. He cruised around town with his brothers and friends. Another thing they did was to sing together a lot, and their harmonies were pretty good. That summer of 61, they formed a group. Their friend Al wanted it to be a folk group, but the others were into rock and roll. Now, one day, Brian's brother Dennis started driving him crazy about this new sport that had come from Hawaii, where you rode this thing that looked like an ironing board on top of ocean waves. Brian got interested and even wrote a song about it. He also handed the song in for his music class at school. That music teacher at Hawthorne High was Fred Morgan, who's now a counselor there for adult education. He remembers, quote, Brian wrote a composition that turned out to be the song Surfin'. Well, I gave the song an F, but it went on to make $1 million.
Surfing is the only life, the only way for me now. Surf.
At the beginning of 1962, Surfin' hit number 78 on the Billboard chart. It had been released on a tiny local record label. Next, Capitol Records offered the group a big contract. The Beach Boys caught a wave and were sitting on top of the world. Surfin' was the Beach Boys' first hit record. And their 54th chart hit is in the countdown this week. It's the biggest mover. It moves up 10 notches to number 6. The Beach Boys and Kokomo. The Beach Boys take a dip in the cool crystal countdown water and come up for air at number 6 this week, up 10 notches. By the way, they cut that record without Brian Wilson.
Casey's Top 40.
I'm Casey Kasem. Our special countdown of the top 40 summer hits of the 80s originates in Hollywood. Now, let's open our Top 40 scrapbook to the chapter on the bands of summer and our story of the most successful summer act of all time. Now, over the years, a lot of acts have hit during the summer with a lot of great summer songs, but none of them has become as much a part of summer as this five-man band from Hawthorne, California. Not all their hits came during the summer, but even if you heard one of their songs in the dead of winter, your thoughts couldn't help but turn to surf, sand, and summer fun in the sun. They did more than any other act to popularize the classic California lifestyle, hanging 10, cruising in cars, and most of all, looking at beautiful California girls. And the funny thing is, Brian Wilson, the man at the center of this surfing family band, didn't surf at all. And he wrote many of his hit songs about the beach while sitting at a piano in his living room with his bare feet planted in a big box full of sand. Over the years, Brian and the group churned out such great summertime hits as Surfin USA, Surfer Girl, I Get Around, Help Me Rhonda, Sloop John B., and the song that's come to mean summer as much, if not more, than any song to ever hit the charts. Here's an extra on our Casey's Top 40 countdown of the biggest summer hits of the 80s, the Beach Boys, and their 1965 classic, California Girls. There's the group and the song that defined the sound of summer better than anything else in the history of rock. From 1965, the Beach Boys, paying homage to those lovely California girls. An extra in our special countdown of the biggest #1 summer hits of the 1980s. Up next, a #1 smash from the summer of '89. It's by the only Cuban-American act to make our survey, and it isn't Gloria.
Casey's Top 40.
I'm Casey Kasem with our Millennium Special, The 40 Days That Changed Music. While Detroit became known as Hitsville, USA, Los Angeles was fast becoming the surf capital of the USA. In a sleepy suburb of Los Angeles, a town called Hawthorne, three brothers were about to create a revolution of their own. The Wilson brothers, Denny, Carl, and Brian. Along with cousin Mike Love and friend Al Jardine, they formed a band. They went through a variety of names, but on December the 31st, 1961, they found a name that stuck. The Beach Boys. In 1963, they borrowed the melody from Chuck Berry's hit Sweet Little 16 and transformed it into their first top 10 hit, Surfin USA.
If everybody had an ocean, Surfin USA.
The Beach Boys with Surfin USA from 1963. I'm Casey Kasem. You're listening to our Millennium Special, The 40 Days That Changed Music.
Casey's Countdown.
Every week, Casey's Countdown's heard across the nation and around the world on great radio stations like today's hits and yesterday's favorites, KZ96, Rapid City, South Dakota, WCFR-FM 93.5 at your service, Springfield, Vermont, 98Q, Vidalia, Georgia, and WMGN, Madison, Real Music Variety, Magic 98, Madison, Wisconsin. Well, now we're up to a Casey's Countdown Extra. It's by the #1 American band of the 60s, a pop group that's now moving into the worlds of country and grunge rock. They became the #1 American band of the 60s thanks to classic hits like Surfin' USA, I Get Around, and California Girls, songs that they still sing at sold-out concerts today. Since their debut in 1961, the Beach Boys have become an American institution, and they continue to reach out to new fans. Just last month, they reached out to grunge rock fans when they released a single on the famous Seattle grunge rock label called Sub Pop. It's a single with 3 new remixes of tracks from the Beach Boys' 1966 Pet Sounds album. And even though the sound of that single is very different from Sub Pop's other acts, like hard rockers Soundgarden and Nirvana, the folks at the label say the Beach Boys single is one of their fastest sellers ever. In just a few weeks, the Beach Boys will move into yet another musical world, a world that couldn't be farther from grunge rock, the world of country. They're releasing a CD titled Stars and Stripes. It's an album of classic Beach Boys songs the group re-recorded with country acts like Willie Nelson, Sawyer Brown, and Tammy Wynette. Beach Boy Mike Love says the decision to record with country acts was a natural one. Quote, "Rock and roll and country are both uniquely American. They're both about telling stories." Now, here's one of the Beach Boys' biggest hits, a #1 smash from 1988. As a Casey's Countdown Extra, here's Kokomo.
Aruba, Jamaica,
From 1988, that's a Casey's Countdown Extra. The Beach Boys with their #1 pop smash, Kokomo.
Casey's Coast to Coast.